Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Islam for Youth series. We have been discussing various areas and various issues relating to Islam. So we have discussed the sources of Islam vis-a-vis the Quran and the Sunnah. We have also talked about the status and the position of Hadith. And then we have also embarked upon studying the belief system of Islam and the Quran. And we have studied how we believe in God and what are the reasons that make us uh, realize that there is a creator and we are answerable to him. So in the last session, we in fact studied how we would connect to prophets of God and how our belief in the prophets of God is substantiated by the Quran. And today, another thing which also relates to our beliefs will be discussed, and that is how do we believe and why do we believe that there is a hereafter or there is going to be a day of judgment. So we're going to talk about some of the signs, some of the reasons that we believe, or which actually the Quran tells us to believe in order to understand why there is going to be a day of judgment. What is the proof of the fact that there is going to be a day of judgment? So the Quran talks about that. We'll discuss the arguments which the Quran presents in this regard, and also we'll study some of the signs of the day of judgment. That how do we know that the day of judgment is coming, or when is it going to come? Does the Quran mention any such signs? So this is how we're going to study the belief in the hereafter, or the set of beliefs that make us connected to the fact or aware of the fact that a day of judgment is going to be brought about by the Almighty, and all of us will be answerable to Him for all the deeds that we did. So we'll start off in this regard by a very important aspect. As I said, that the first thing that we have to understand is why at all should we believe that there is going to be a hereafter, and how do we believe that there is going to be a day of judgment. So our first section actually hinges upon the fact, or it relates to the fact, that what are the proofs of the fact that there is going to be a day of judgment. There is going to be a qiyamah, so to speak. So let's study the Quran in this regard. And if we do study the Quran, we'll find out there are five compelling reasons or five compelling arguments which actually prove that there is a hereafter. So the first of them is what we call human conscience, the awareness of good and evil. It is because of this awareness that we find that our conscience tells us that whatever is good, it feels as if we are absolutely elated. We are absolutely overjoyed. Our conscience actually feels good if we do what good is, and at the same time, it rebukes us for all the wrong that we do. And as far as the conscience is concerned, if it is vibrant, if it is living, it never lies. So the fact that this human conscience is there, and there is this sensitivity towards right and wrong, uh, it automatically means that right and wrong, they must have a fate, they must have a consequence, they must have some thing which has to be brought about in the manner that what righteousness is, what piety is, it is rewarded, and what is against it is punished. Because if there is no conscience, of course, then the whole matter would be entirely different. But in the presence of human conscience, the question arises is that if God has placed this barometer in us, then there has got to be some reason for that. And the reason that we do understand is that that conscience tells us that right and wrong, they must be differentiated by people, and they must not be dealt with in the same way. Times what righteousness is, what piety is, it ends up being maltreated. It ends up as if people who are doing good, even they suffer in this world. And on the other hand, we find people who would be disobeying their conscience, in other words, would find themselves at the highest ladder of a society. So you see, there is this contradiction that our whole human conscience, the thing that we have inside us, tells us that right and wrong must have a different consequence. But in this world, this does not happen. So therefore, it points to the fact that there is going to be a day in which the verdict of human conscience that right should be rewarded and evil should be punished is going to take place. So the first proof of the day of judgment is our conscience. The presence of this conscience in ourselves tells us that there is this thing in which we have to understand that right and wrong will be brought to a conclusion by the Almighty. So this is the first proof, and you'll find that this is actually mentioned in the Quran, which I've just explained to you in this 75th surah of the Quran, which is called Surah Qiyamah. The first 15 verses, these verses are لا أقسم بيوم القيامة ولا أقسم بالنفس اللوامة أيحسب الإنسان أن لن نجمع عظامه بلى قادرين على أن نسوي بنانا بل يريد الإنسان ليفجر أمامه يسأل أيان يوم القيامة. So I'm not going to read the whole of this passage, just to give you its translation. By no means I present as evidence the day of judgment itself, and they think that the day of judgment is a far-fetched reality. By no means. I present as evidence this reproaching soul within you, this conscience within you. What is the reproaching soul? The conscience within us. That is an evidence of the day of judgment, as the Quran says. Does man think that we will not be able to bring together his bones? Why not? We can put together his very fingertips. No, this is not so. In fact, the truth is that man wants to be mischievous before his conscience. He asks, when will the day of judgment be? But on the day when the sight is dazed and the moon eclipsed and the sun and the moon brought together, this very man will say, whither to flee? Now there is no refuge now. Towards your Lord, that day is the resting place. On that day, man will be informed what he sent forth and what he left behind. On that day, man will be informed what he sent forth and what he left behind. No, he cannot deny it. In fact, he himself is a witness upon his own self, however he much put up excuses. So you see, the Quran makes this case of the fact that the day of judgment is something which is a requisite of this conscience that we have. This conscience tells us that there is going to be a day of judgment, a day of accountability in which the right and wrong, as is the verdict of our conscience, should be rewarded in a way that they deserve to be rewarded. Now, the second proof of the day of judgment is our human nature. Remember, the first was our conscience. The second is human nature. And why is that a proof of the day of judgment? This is because, you see, by virtue of our nature, we like what justice is and we dislike injustice. And all of us know that a person may want to steal from another person's house, but he would never like someone to steal from his own house. He may kill someone, but he would never like anyone to take his life. Thus, no one can regard good and evil to be equal or both be dealt with in the same manner. You see, my own nature tells me that okay, if I do something wrong towards another person, I might overlook that. But I would never like someone to do wrong with me, someone to be unjust to me, someone to lie with me, someone to be treat us in a manner which is against fairness, which actually tells this fact that human nature is prone towards goodness. Human nature likes goodness because if it had liked evil, it would have never liked people to do evil. I mean, it would have liked people to do evil with themselves. It would have not been satisfied with the fact that, okay, people can do anything that they want to. As a person, all of us want that other people speak the truth to us, even if we are not speaking the truth to them, which in other words means that we value the truth. We know that it is the right thing to do. So in this manner, our own nature tells us that what right is, whatever the right thing is something which is always liked by our own nature. We'll never go adverse to it. We'll never go against it. We might do something which is against it, but we would never like other people to do the same thing to us. So this is another very important proof of the fact that our own human nature tells that righteousness or good should take place. And when they see that this good is not taking place in this world, and of course this world is created by a wise creator, then the only reason for this is, and the only outcome of this is, that there is going to be a day of accountability in which things which are good to human nature, which feel good for human nature, they will be rewarded, and which are against human nature. And as I said, by this actual phenomena, the thing is that right and wrong would be distinguished in the hereafter. This world just cannot remain in this state as it is, because our own nature tells us that the two cannot be treated equal, and this is precisely towards this fact that the Quran in Surah Qalam has directed our attention to. It says, أَفَنَجْعَلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ كَالْمُجْرِمِينَ مَا لَكُمْ كَيْفَ تَحْكُمُونَ. Are we to deal with those who submit to us as we deal with those who transgress? What is the matter with you? What is this judgment that you give? You see, basically, it is the fact that our nature tells us that right and wrong they have to be distinguished. They must be treated differently. And because of the fact that they are not being treated differently in this world, our nature tells us that there is going to be a day in which the manner in which they are going to be treated will be in accordance with what right and wrong are. If we are doing right, we'll be given a reward. And if we are doing wrong, then we will be punished for that. So just as our conscience tells us that there's going to be a day of judgment because of right and wrong, making that impact on our conscience, in a similar way, our nature also tells us this, because our verdict is that right and wrong cannot be treated equally as they are in this world. So there has to be another world, in which right and wrong should be treated according to what they are. If it is right, then they have to be rewarded. If it is wrong, then they have to be punished. The third thing, actually, which is a proof of the day of judgment, is the incompleteness found in ourselves and in the world around us. So let me give you a couple of instances of how this incompleteness or this vacuum that we feel is there. So human beings are innately aware of the fact that they should be held accountable for each favor he has been blessed with. Every human being. However, they have been left in this world without any such accountability. You see, the first incompleteness or the first flaw of this world is that we don't have any accountability. We don't have a complete accountability. We are left to do whatever we like. At times, we are held accountable, and many a time this accountability does not take place. One. The second is that there are many people who have left this world without being rewarded for their good deeds. Isn't that so? And there are many who have left this world without being punished for their evil deeds. So this again shows that right and wrong, the way people behave, they have to be punished or they have to be rewarded in this world according to what they have done. But this has never happened. And this shows that there is this incompleteness factor which exists in this world. The third aspect of this incompleteness is that human beings are searching for a world in which they can liberate themselves from the sorrows and hardships of this world and from its limitations and live a life of happiness and contentment. This desire is found in them since time immemorial. So you see, all of us would like to live a life of serenity, a life of peace, because this is what our own inner nature tells us, our own inner self tells us. And we are searching for a place or a life or a continuum in which the sorrows of this life, in which the hardships and difficulties are no longer there. I mean, this is something which we have in our mind. So this is like saying that if we feel thirsty, we have water for that. If we feel hungry, we have food for that. But what if we feel that there should be a place in which there must be peace, comfort, and we should not have any hardships, but we don't have any external thing which quenches this feeling, just that it quenches our thirst. Water is there to quench our thirst. Food is there to make us satisfy our hunger. But what is there to satisfy this feeling that there should be comfort in this world? There is nothing. So this is a factor of incompleteness that we find plaguing this world. And then we have this thing which we call the soul. The question is that there are so many things, there are so many questions which arises that when we die, of course, our own human body, it goes waste. You find yourself being buried. But then there are so many things which we don't know what will happen to them. For example, the memory that we have, the soul that we possess, the inner person in us, it just vanishes. The question is that where did that soul come from? Where will it go? What will happen? Because all that has been destroyed is our physical existence when we die. So the question again is that incompleteness that we find ourselves engulfed with, that we don't have an answer to the fact that where does our soul go? where does it inhabit, and what becomes of it? And then again, there's this another factor of incompleteness or unanswerable, or something which is unanswerable in this world is that this huge universe is not inhabited as much as we would have imagined it to. A couple of planets, maybe, or as the Quran says, that there are six other planets besides this Earth which would be inhabited. But other than that, there are thousands and millions and billions of galaxies and heavenly bodies which are there just for our. I mean, they cause so much amazement and wonder in ourselves. But apparently, they don't have any purpose. They don't seem to serve a purpose. I mean, they are just a manifestation of God's creativity. So the question arises that why is this phenomenon existing? That we have a whole bunch of things in such a large number, apparently without a purpose, apparently incomplete, and what will happen to them? So we have this third element regarding the proof of the hereafter, that as far as this incompleteness is concerned, there has to be some reason to it. Okay. The fourth thing in this regard are the attributes of the Almighty. We know that God has extraordinary power, He has extraordinary mercy, He has providence, He has wisdom, and we have so many things which are positively found that don't manifest themselves as far as God is concerned. So, the attributes of God, the way they are mentioned in the Quran, they tell us that God has made some extraordinary arrangement for us when He has made us dwell on this planet Earth. He has provided us with so many things. I mean, our parents, the atmosphere, the air that we breathe in, the sun, the stars, the moon, the lakes and the mountains, they all seem to serve us. And then what is the purpose of this servitude? How exactly is it going to end? So this question arises is that God has a purpose in making all this extraordinary arrangement for us. He is nourishing us like a child. We grow up uh, through the providence and the elements of nature that He has put to our service. But then all of a sudden we die. And it does seem that it is against these attributes of God, according to which He has made mercy incumbent upon Himself. We find that mercy is mandatory upon Himself. And for that particular mercy, you look what the Quran says. كتب على نفسه الرحمة ليجمعنكم إلى يوم القيامة لا ريب فيه. He has made mercy mandatory on Himself. He will definitely gather you to take you to the day of judgment, about which there is no doubt. So these attributes of mercy, the Almighty tells us that the greatest manifestation of His mercy is going to be on the day of judgment. In this world, His mercy cannot manifest itself completely. Why? Because it's a place of trial and test. And it's not going to be a place in which God's mercy is going to envelop you and engulf you all the time. So, a place in which these attributes of God are going to manifest themselves with their full glory, with their full manifestation, has to come. Otherwise, these attributes of God, they would seem meaningless. So we can see that the fourth proof of the day of judgment are these attributes of God, which which will lead to nothing if that day of judgment does not come. For example, if God is merciful, that's one of His attributes, but we don't see mercy in this world. For example, God is just, but we don't see justice in this world. We see that God is wise, but there is not wisdom always in this world. So you see, it is something which is entailed, something which is necessitated by the attributes of God, that these attributes must manifest themselves, must appear the way they are. And because they don't appear the way they are, the way they should be in this world, then there's got to be another world in which these attributes appear in their full flow, in their full capacity. And then, in this regard, the last and the most important of all these proofs is that what we have discussed many times in our sessions in the past, is that the Almighty creates lesser days of judgment. Remember, He creates lesser days of judgment in this world And these lesser days of judgment, they are basically meant to caution and prod us. They are meant to tell us that, look, in the times of God's messengers. So if you look at this illustration in front of you, there is this prophetic era which has begun from Prophet Muhammad, from the Prophet Adam, and all the way to Prophet Muhammad. So this is what we call the prophetic era. And from Prophet Muhammad to the Judgment Day, we have the post-prophetic era, and we are living in this post-prophetic era. But one of the greatest features of the prophetic era is, which I just referred to, that lesser days of judgments, they are set up, they are created in the life of every messenger of God, and people are rewarded or punished. They are rewarded if they profess faith in the messenger, they are punished if they intentionally deny the messenger. So that this can become a rehearsal for the people who live in the post prophetic era, that God is going to hold people accountable because He did hold people accountable in the times of His messengers. And once the last messenger passed away, and now that we are living in this post prophetic era, that's going to come again. That accountability which took place for these nations of the prophet in this world is going to take place for all of us on a particular day, and that is the day of judgment. So, the biggest proof or the biggest visual proof of the day of judgment is those lesser days of judgment which took place in the times of all the prophets of God, all the messengers of God. So the people of their nations, they were destroyed at times through natural disasters, earthquakes, floods, drowning, and all those things. If they professed faith, if they did not profess faith, and they were rewarded if they did do so. And once the last messenger of God passed away, these lesser days of judgment, of course, as I've been discussing, they no longer come, but they have served their purpose because the anecdotes of all these lesser days of judgment have been preserved in the Quran. So, in the times of the Prophet Noah, Prophet Moses, Prophet Jesus, similarly, some of the earlier prophets, like, for example, the Prophet Shuaib, the Prophet Saleh, the Prophet Hud, their nations, when they intentionally denied them, then the Almighty punished them in this world, so that this punishment could remind people who are living in the post prophetic era that God is not going to let people go like this. Just as He set up those lesser days of judgment in the prophetic era, He is going to set up those a bigger day of judgment, a greater day of judgment, in which each and every person is going to be held accountable. So, to sum up, we have these five proofs of the day of judgment. The first is human conscience. The second is human nature. The third is the incompleteness factor, which is found in this world. The fourth is the attributes of God. And the fifth, these lesser days of judgment, which tell us that there is going to be a greater day of judgment. So, these five things necessitate that there is going to be a day of judgment which is going to take place. So, this was the first part of our session today. In the second part, we are going to discuss regarding the signs of the day of judgment. So, the first thing that we must acknowledge when we read the Quran is that as far as the day of judgment is concerned, the Quran says that it will come suddenly. It will not announce that it's going to come. So, the word used by the Quran is baghtatan. Baghtatan means suddenly. People will be doing their own chores, they will be in their own routines, and suddenly we find that the stars and the moon and all these phenomenon, all these elements of nature, they are being destroyed, and a new world is being created. But in spite of the fact that it is going to come suddenly, there are certain signs mentioned both in the Quran and in the Hadith regarding the day of judgment. So let me give you the fact that there are basically two types of signs, or I can say there are two categories of signs. So the first category are the general signs. And general signs are, I mean, they are not pinpointed, and they are mentioned in Hadith. And just let me read out that Hadith to you. It says that, for example, knowledge will be lifted, ignorance will increase, fornication, drinking and killings, and lootings will become rampant, so much so that innocent people will be killed. Women will outnumber men to the extent that the affairs of 50 women will be entrusted to one man. Only evil people will exist in this world, and it will become devoid of people who take God's name. So you see, one of these, the first category are a bunch of general signs, which I've just cited before you. And these general signs have been mentioned in the hadith that, for example, knowledge will be lifted and all this world will have are evil people. Goodness will no longer remain, and people would be killed. They would be drunkard. I mean, they would be called drunkards. They would indulge in fornication and looting and plunder and all sorts of bad things. So this is the first category. These are general signs. They are not pinpointed, but as I said, they do have this general ring about them. Now let's go on to the second category. The second category are specific signs. And amongst the specific signs, some are mentioned in the Quran and some in the Hadith. And as far as these specific signs are concerned, there are of two types. One of them tell us regarding the nearness of the day of judgment. I mean, the proximity signs, which mean that the day of judgment is going to happen after them. And the other ones, they are called the signs on which the day of judgment is going to actually take place, the exact time of the day of judgment. So, as you can see, they are called the final signs. So, in other words, in category B, which is what? The specific signs. We have two types of signs, the proximity signs and the final signs. The proximity means when someone is near. It has not arrived. It's not the final sign, but it signals the fact that the day of judgment is near. And we have this sign which is mentioned in the Quran, and that is that Gog and Magog will be let loose. The Yajuj and the Majuj, they would be let loose. They would occupy the borders of this earth at the time of the day of judgment, and they will start going inside and they will attack people. And as far as these people are concerned, as you can see, they are basically the Gog and Magog are descendants of Noah's son Japhet, who inhabited the northern areas of Asia, and later some of their tribes reached Europe, and after that settled in America and Australia. So these are basically, Gog and Magog are tribes. They are the descendants of the third son of Noah. So remember, Noah had sons, famously three sons, Sam, Ham, and Japheth. So the Gog and Magog are basically the descendants or the progeny of the son of Japheth, or the third son of Noah. And their details are given in some of the earliest scriptures. And as far as these proximity signs are concerned, you'll find that these proximity signs, the first of them is the arrival of Gog and Magog, and this proximity sign will ultimately converge into the final sign. The rise of the Gog and Magog is the thing which signals the proximity, that now the day of judgment is near. But they will reach their peak, and when they reach their peak, it will be as if the day of judgment is just going to arrive. So there is another thing that we have to understand, that amongst these proximity signs, there are some which are mentioned as far as the hadith is concerned, and there are basically two. This is a hadith which is from the Al-Jami al-Sahih of Imam Muslim. It says, "Antayad al-ammat rabbataha wa antara al-hufat al-urat yatatabaluna antura hufat al-urat riha an-nas riha ash-shah yatatabaluna fil bunyan." The Arabic is not properly legible here. I'm just going to have it corrected, but the translation is that a single slave lady will, one sign is that a slave lady will give birth to a mistress, and the second sign is that you will see these indigent Arab shepherds walking barefooted, bareheaded, trying to compete with one another in making tall buildings. So, Antarid al-Amad Rabbataha means that slavery actually will be abolished, and that these Arab shepherds, they will actually indulge in making these tall buildings. And we can see that as far as both these sides are concerned, they already have happened. So we have seen that slavery has been abolished in the last century, and we have seen how in the land of Arabia, people have started to make those skyscrapers and those tall buildings. So we can clearly see that as far as the signs of proximity are concerned, there are three. One is mentioned in the Quran, which is the rise of Gog and Magog. Two of them are mentioned in the Hadith, which is that slavery will be abolished, and that has been mentioned in a very subtle expression, that the slave lady will give birth to her mistress. Remember, the mistress is always a free person. The slave lady giving her birth to her mistress, which would mean that whatever she'll produce would be a free person. So this is a subtle expression to tell us that slavery will be abolished. And the second is that these Arab shepherds walking barefooted and bareheaded, of course, there were people who were very uncouth in those times, but they will construct those tall buildings. So this is the third proximity sign. And we can clearly see that all of these three have actually begun. How? Because as far as Gog and Magog are concerned, if you study these scriptures, which I have just alluded to you, they basically are these yellow races. They are the Mongols, the Chinese, typically, and they have started to occupy the borders of the earth. They have started to make their presence felt. They are now becoming a superpower slowly and surely. But when will they reach their peak is something which is yet to be seen. So remember, as far as the general signs are concerned, we have already mentioned them. And as far as the certain signs are concerned, they are again of two types. One of them are the proximity signs, and the other one is the final signs. So amongst these proximity signs, we have those three categories which I've just mentioned. And now let's go on to the next, which is the final sign. And these final signs have been mentioned in a particular hadith of the Prophet Muhammad. And as you can see that it actually also has that rise of Gog and Magog reaching its culmination. So that's mentioned at number 7. So if you view this hadith, it tells us that there are 10 signs of the Day of Judgment, and these are the final signs. Remember, the previous one were the signs of the Day of Judgment coming near us. I mean, they are the signs of proximity. And these 10 signs, which I mentioned in hadith, they are the final signs, which mean that as soon as they happen, then the Day of Judgment is just about to come. The first of them is the sinking of the earth in the east. The second is the sinking of the earth in the west. The third is sinking of the earth in the Arabian Peninsula. Then we have smoke. Then we have the Jal coming. Then we have a land animal which will be probably born directly from the earth, the way all creatures were created directly in the beginning. Then we have the onslaught of Gog and Magog. Remember, that was a sign of proximity earlier on, but that will also that will culminate in a final sign as well, because the onslaught of Gog and Magog began as a proximity sign. It's going to mature into a final sign at a certain point of time. And with the rise of the Chinese, we can clearly see that the proximity signs have arrived. However, when they will reach the final stage, this is something yet to be seen. And then we have the rising of the sun in the west. So we know that the sun rises from the east these days, but on the Day of Judgment, it will rise from the west. And the ninth sign is a fire that will rise from a pit of the Yemenite city of Eden and drive the people from behind. So in the city of Eden in Yemen today, we know that there's a city there. There's going to be a huge fire, and that is going to drive people from behind. It's going to push them from behind. And then finally, we have the 10th sign, a wind that will blow people away into the sea. So these are the 10 signs which are the final signs of the Day of Judgment. So just to, clarify things once more, we have two categories of signs regarding the Day of Judgment. One of them are the general signs, okay? And the other ones are the signs of proximity. As far as those general signs are concerned, we have just seen that those signs are mentioned in hadith, and they tell us that knowledge will be lifted, ignorance will be there in abundance, people will indulge in evil, only evil people will be left on the surface of the earth, etc. So these are the general signs. And the second category, they are the signs which are specific. So the one is general, the second is specific. Amongst those specific signs, there is the signs of proximity, and then there are signs which are the final signs. As far as the proximity signs are concerned, there are three: the rise of Gog and Magog, the abolition of slavery, and the construction of huge skyscrapers, which of course is referring to the land of Arabia. And the other one regarding these specific signs are the signs which are mentioned right at the time of arrival. I mean, the arrival would be just round the corner when these 10 signs materialize. One of them is the same, which is sign of proximity, in which Gog and Magog, their onslaught will actually reach its culmination. And other than that, we have these 9 signs besides that sign of Gog and Magog. So you see This is how the Almighty has also made this fact evident to us, that as far as we human beings are concerned, we have to find ourselves always in a position that there is going to be the day of judgment that's going to happen. As far as the proofs of this day are concerned, you've just seen that there are five of them that the Quran discusses very prominently, and it does not leave us with these proofs. It also tells us that as far as the day of judgment is concerned, it's not going to come unannounced. Of course, it's going to come suddenly, but then in order to make ourselves prepared for that huge event, we have been told that there is a whole category of signs. One of them are the general signs, in which you'll start to know that something is going wrong, and they are mentioned in a general way. And then we have the specific signs. And amongst those specific signs, there are two categories. One of them are the proximity signs, which mean that the day of judgment is near. And the other one are the final signs, which mean that it's just round the corner. So one is nearness and the other is round the corner. And this is how we have been told in the Quran and Hadith that this day of judgment is going to arrive, and when it does, all of us will be held accountable for our deeds. So, therefore, the bottom line regarding all this mention is that we have to prepare ourselves to meet God Almighty one day. It's going to happen, come what may. It is going to be there for us. We have to face, each one of us has to face the Almighty, and we will be questioned about our deeds on that day. No one is going to help us. Not our father, not our mothers, not our brothers, not our children, not our friends, none of them. It is we ourselves who are going to be facing God alone. So therefore, we have to be on a guard. We have to prepare ourselves for the day of judgment, and we have to prepare ourselves for that accountability. And how exactly do we prepare for that accountability? Of course, that is by connecting ourselves deeply to God, by trying to do what right is, by shunning evil, by evading evil, by trying to do all those things which our conscience tells us is is right, are right, and by evading or ignoring things which are wrong. Because you see, what happens is that when we do wrong things or we indulge in evil, why does this happen? It happens because we lose sight of the day of judgment. We forget that there's going to be accountability. So you see, the Almighty has made plenty of effort for us to keep on reminding us that there's going to be a day of judgment. He's given those proofs. So in the times of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was in Arabia, uh, the idolaters, or the people who worship idols in his times, they never thought that there's going to be a day of judgment. They said, well, this is all nonsense, it's a far-fetched thing. And if there is going to be a day of judgment, then their own deities, their own idols are going to save them. So, particularly for them, the Almighty recounted this fact that, look, yes, this is not the right approach. You are going to be held accountable, if not in this world, then in the hereafter. And the second thing is that the Almighty has also made arrangements for us to at least understand certain signals, certain signs, which are like a rehearsal that thing is going to arrive. And when the day of judgment arrives, there's no turning back. All of us will be alone. We would be answering God for whatever we did, and we would have no help whatsoever from our friends or relatives or anyone that we consider close to us. So we now bring to an end our today's session with this particular thought, with this particular assertion that, remember, a fundamental thing that we must always remember is this sense of accountability. Whenever we lead our lives on this planet Earth, whatever we do must be driven with this sense of accountability, with this sense of this feeling that we are going to be held answerable before the Almighty. So thank you very much for being with me for this time. And now you can ask any questions that you have, particularly relating to the topic that we've just discussed.
Our first question is from Musa Harun.
So my question is about the hadith of Sahih Muslim in where the slavery was abolished. So the second sign was that barefooted and bareheaded they build the tall buildings. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
see that how the
Mm-hmm.
barefooted and bareheaded is fulfilled as a prophecy.
You see, the Arab shepherds, if you would look in times of the Prophet, the way they were, and especially when this era of skyscrapers had not come, like let's say in the 60s when they were like Bedouins, they were like uncouth people. So basically, it's telling us that since the time of the Prophet until this era of construction arrived, in which they made all sorts of skyscrapers that you can now see in Mecca and Medina. If you go right back in history, maybe 50 years from now, in the past, you'll see that it was like a desert. It was like a land which was absolutely infertile. There was hardly any population except people who were indigenous who lived there. No one would have liked to go there. It was in the about 50 years ago, in the 70s, or maybe slightly before that, when a huge revolution took place, when oil was discovered and it became an oil-rich country, and that actually changed the economy and it changed the whole complexion of the land of Arabia, a land which was totally infertile, very sparsely populated. No one wanted to go there. Suddenly became a land of opportunities. It was as if gold had been discovered there, and then a whole process of mechanization entered, and we find that the Arabs, as you can see, they are now the cities that they have built are now all cosmopolitan cities. They're all decked with the same sorts of buildings that you see, high-rise buildings in the West. So it was like a prediction which was made regarding them that this is how this land of Arabia will come one day, and that would actually signal the nearness. It's not, as I said, it's not the exact time of arrival of the Day of Judgment, but it tells us regarding the proximity of the Day of Judgment.
So, sir, it's basically a description of the old Arabs, the barefooted.
Right, absolutely.
The next person in line is Douglas Marr.
Hey, Dr. Saleem. I'm still a bit confused about Gog and Magog. You had a slide that said they were in Russia, but that their descendants went to America, and I'm just confused about the whole timeline.
They went to Moscow, to Balsk, and Rus, which is Russia actually. So we know that the United States or the American continent was inhabited by people much later on. Of course, they had their own indigenous population, but the Gog and Magog, the way they are being portrayed, you'll find their description in the book of Revelations, which is the last book of the Bible, and we find it to be the revelation of John the Divine. And in that book, the whole history of Gog and Magog has been actually mentioned. And the excerpts that you might have seen during my talk actually have been taken from the book of Revelation.
Oh, okay, but that doesn't. I'm still just really confused about what or who Gog and Magog are.
So you see, Gog and Magog are the name of two people by whose name ultimately there was a whole dynasty which came to be known. So it's like saying that there were two people. Basically, there are two names of two people, and by those two names, their whole progeny came to be known through those two names. So it started off by a single name of a single person, but their whole progeny, their whole descendants came to be called as Gog and Magog.
Oh, I see. So Gog and Magog is the term that you use to refer to the descendants of Gog and Magog, but it's also referring to their progenitors.
Absolutely.
Okay, I get it.
Our next question is from Suleiman Ahmed.
Yes, hello. I had a question, and that is for all the characteristics that were explained for when the Day of Judgment comes. Are these characteristics metaphorical or are they literal?
Regarding the signs you're talking about, like for example, the rising of the sun in the west, or
yeah, those ones.
Well, they are literal. I think the way they have been mentioned does not leave any possibility that they should be interpreted in a metaphorical way or an allegorical way. It does seem that they are literal, and the fact that the sun is going to rise in the west, I still cannot comprehend how. But there was this phenomena which took place some years ago, I think 5 or 6 years ago, and the scientists too have alluded to that, and that is at times what happens is that the spin of the earth accounts for the sun rising in the east or in the west. And therefore, if the sun stops, if the earth stops and starts spinning the other way around, I mean, it's spinning at the moment from east to west.
Yeah.
And if on one occasion or any occasion the spin of the earth reverses, then you'll see the sun rising in the west. So I think it's astronomically a possible reality. It's something which even is possible as far as physics is concerned. So I do think that these are signs which are literal. They are not metaphorical. And if science is at the moment not being able to answer all of them, I do think that one day it will be able to. Just as I said, that the rising of the sun in the west, many years from now in the past, it was something that people could not have imagined. But today, as I said, by the earth spinning in the opposite direction will give rise to that phenomena in which people will see that the sun first appears in the west and then actually sets in the east.
Okay. Thank you.
Next person in line is Bassam Ahmed.
Yes, Basim, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. So
Yeah.
my question is, when you were saying the 10 signs, how is smoke one of the signs for the Day of Judgment? Would it be like a catastrophic event that would release like smoke into the air?
So if you're referring to this number 4 sign which says smoke, as I said, this could refer to a great atomic explosion. Because you see, what happens is that these words are mentioned in a very brief and a concise way. So exactly trying to tell us that what or trying to determine what the smoke will be about, it's not very easy. Most of these signs will be understood when they actually appear, because you see, all that we now have are words which describe them, and how they will actually come about, what exactly will be the type of that smoke, how will it arise, will it be a form of smoke the way smoke is after fire, or is it in the form of an explosion? That's all that is. All that is yet to be seen, and all that we can do is that we need to understand that these are the things which will materialize, and ultimately, when they do materialize, we'll be able to connect what we have read about them when we see them. Actually,
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Can I also ask a question myself?
of course.
So I was wondering, can humans control like when Day of Judgment comes? So like if Arabs stop building skyscrapers, or people threw a bomb in Yemen and like that creates a huge fire, wouldn't that accelerate or like slow down the Day of Judgment?
So you see, this is something which is not being done on a voluntary basis. It's not being planned and being done. All that is happening is happening the way things happen not normally or naturally in the course of history. So when they started to build those buildings, those skyscrapers, they had never had they never got the chance to do that earlier on, simply because oil was not available to them, or it was not discovered, and whatever they were doing because of circumstances which existed. You see, this is like God telling us that circumstances will be naturally created. It will be all in a natural way, and as they are created, not planned but created, that these things will spring up. And then remember that the sign of these skyscrapers and these Arabs barefooted who have built these skyscrapers, and slavery being abolished. So these are the signs of proximity. They are not the exact signs in which the Day of Judgment is going to arrive. They are going to signal that it's going to be near. How near, again, is the question. Because you see, to God, 1,000 years or 50,000 years or so many years, one Earth day is equal to so many thousand years of God. So you see, the word near itself is something which is subject to subjectivity, I would say. So even if this is a proximity sign, the proximity sign only tells us that something is near. But how near, again, that's a question.
Okay, thank you so much. The next question is from Douglas Marr.
So I had a question about the proximity sign of the slave woman giving birth to her mistress. And so in English, mistress doesn't necessarily just imply a slave owner, or it necessarily implies a free person. It normally implies also a slave owner. So when I read that, to me, as like an English speaker, it seems to be saying a slave woman will give birth to her owner, not
right. So that's the right. Actually, the sense is that. So maybe a better translation would be the slave. You see, the reason that it has been translated as mistress is uh, like a female for the word master. So just as the word master
Yeah.
is is spoken for an owner, when you say the master of the day of judgment, it also means the owner of the day of judgment. So the
Right.
original connotation of the word mistress and master are basically uh, they relate to that ownership thing. But as you see that the word mistress has, it has evolved and it has engulfed some other meanings as well. But
So the,
to be precise, it actually means the owner.
okay.
And because of the fact that the owner is going to be free,
So then the actual translation is accurately saying a slave woman will give birth to her owner.
yeah, absolutely. Because the owner is free, remember?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I don't see your connection to that meaning the abolition of slavery, because I mean, if an owner still exists, then that's still slavery.
But you see, you can see that thing happening in Arabia and in Arabs, and it actually took place in the last century, where in spite of the fact that things were still going on, today slavery stands abolished because of certain human rights. As a violation of human rights, and because of the fact that Saudi Arabia has actually signed on that treaty,
Oh yeah,
in
I'm
which
not disputing that slavery has been abolished. I was just saying that
right.
I don't see how this verse seems to be referring to the abolition of slavery. To me, it seems to be
Okay.
that a younger generation will own the older generation of slaves. Maybe I don't know.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, you can have a difference in interpretation of. Remember, it's not a Quranic verse. It's mentioned in
Oh, is
Hadith.
that a hadith?
No, it's not a Quranic verse. It's a Hadith actually.
Oh, okay.
So Hadith is something which is transmitted by people, and
Yeah,
when it's
yeah.
transmitted by people, the words actually they are not exactly the same. All that we can understand is to make an educated guess or to try to understand. Perhaps this is what the Prophet would have said. So the word
But
itself,
yeah.
at times, they lose their importance. The sense that's conveyed is conveyed. And that is why, of course, there could be a difference of opinion.
The next person in line is Mehra Muzaffar.
On the last slide, on
Yeah.
number 5, it says the jaw.
Right?
Could you like I don't know what it is. Like,
Okay. So let me try to explain. The word Dajjal means a great deceiver, some personality who's going to deceive people and really, cause a huge deception. In some of the other narratives of the Prophet, it is mentioned as Al-Masihu Dajjal, which means a person who will falsely pose himself to be Jesus. So he will be a false Messiah, a person who will deceive people that he has been sent by God as Jesus, and he would be lying. He would be deceiving people for that. And some of the other narratives do tell us that he would be one-eyed. Some of them tell us that he would no longer have the right eye. Some other tell us that he would be blind in the left eye. But regardless of the fact, the truth, which what we can understand from these narratives is that one of his eyes, he would be blind in one of his eyes, whether the left one or the right one. And then, as I said, that these narratives qualify the word Dajjal by the expression Al-Masih ud-Dajjal. Al-Masih is the same as Jesus. So it would be the false Jesus or the Antichrist or the Antichrist. Someone who would be a false Christ. So this is a further explanation of the word Dajjal.
okay, thank you.
Next person in the queue is Musa Harun.
Yes, Musa, go ahead.
Sir, about Mariam's question that if we control the signs of proximity and the general signs, sir, I didn't understand the answer that if we control these signs, wouldn't it create an effect of delaying or stopping type of effect?
You see, the fact that we can delay or whether we can delay them or not is itself something which is debatable. I think it's not that possible. Because you see, as far as the fact is concerned that the whole of the city of Mecca will become replete with skyscrapers, this cannot be planned. It can only take place when you have the wealth, when you have the ability to and the infrastructure to do that. And again, if even that is planned, that's just a very partial thing. All that you can do is to plan something that you become oil. If you become oil rich, of course, you become a country in which all these buildings and skyscrapers are constructed. Maybe, okay, just for a moment we can think that this particular thing can be controlled. But as I said, all that it does is this gives you an inkling of the fact that the day of judgment is going to arrive. When that arrival is going to actually take place, again, is something which is a big question mark. Because as I said, the word proximity has an element of ambiguity about it, an element of vagueness about it. How near? And even if we plan it, how near can we go to the near judgment? That has not been disclosed. And then remember, that's not the only sign. The other one is the rise of Gog and Magog. And I can see clearly, if I analyze the last 20 years of the rise of the Chinese, that rise has taken place, but it's yet to reach its peak. So the day of judgment is going to arrive when the rise of Gog and Magog reaches its peak. It's like they are taking off. They are on the path to reach their peak, but they still have some way to go. But all of us can clearly see that China and the Euro races are now slowly and surely beginning to challenge the authority and the supremacy of the United States. But how far will that go and when will that actually happen, again, is something, as you can see, it's not humanly controllable because there are so many factors in which we can, not even interfere. We need to see how things will progress and how they will happen.
Sir, considering the general signs of fornication or theft, for example, we create such laws that give no chance or give little chance to these acts. So,
you see, when you say we, so remember, there is this, the whole world is involved here. We is just we. People like in one country. Can this happen that all the people of the world, all their kings and the queens and the presidents, they gather in one place and they say, okay, we'll make these laws and it's not going to happen? I don't see that happening. Maybe a couple of countries, maybe a few areas can be, according to what you say. But planning the whole world in a way, you need one king for the whole world or one ruler for the whole world for that to happen. And I don't see that happening actually. So I think it's a very far-fetched thing to say that we can control these circumstances.
The next person in line is Douglas Marr.
So concerning your response about Dajjal, so you said that it could variously be translated kind of like a false Christ or antichrist, and so being an atheist growing up in America, my only encounter with the idea of antichrist is like the Christian idea of the antichrist, in which it's like the opposite of Jesus, a harbinger of destruction and evil who's sent down to earth. So they see the Antichrist as sort of like like a supervillain version of Jesus. But what you're saying here is that in the Islamic interpretation, it's more of a poser, a deceiver who claims to be Jesus but is not.
Yes,
if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, you have understood it absolutely correctly. That the understanding here is that a person who is going to deceive us by posing himself to be Jesus, of course, is not going to be Jesus. He will deceive people, and because of the fact that you can see in the Muslim tradition, also in the Christian tradition, and perhaps also in the Jewish tradition, there are people waiting for the Messiah. So whether he's going to be Jesus himself, whether he's going to be the Messiah of the Jews, or whether he's going to be some other personality, it does seem that this person, whoever he will be, he will take advantage amongst these three Abrahamic religions and use them and try to say that, well, I am the Messiah, I am the Jesus you were waiting for, or I am the God. He's the person who's going to be there and he's going to pose and try to deceive people. And it does seem that he will perhaps succeed in some way. Again, that would signal the day of judgment, because as you can see that the way it has been mentioned, it's one of the final signs of the day of judgment. It would mean that the day of judgment is right around the corner after that.
Okay, I understand better now. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. We had an interesting discussion. Remember, the day of judgment is always a thing which intrigues all of us, and it is something that we all have to face. We have to be there. So I think it's in the fitness of things that we prepare ourselves for this purpose. We do the best things that we can do. And the thing that I'd like to say to you before I just sign off is that wherever you live, remember that there's one thing that you can always do as a person who can serve humanity even when all of us pass away, because that day of judgment is going to be a day in which we'll be facing God, and that is if you can make this will that you donate your organs which are beneficial to other people, like for example your eyes, your skin, your kidney maybe, or your liver. There are so many things that can be of help to other people, and they are not going to be help to us when we pass away. So in any case, I think it would be a wonderful thing that realizing that there is going to be a day of judgment, each one of us is going to pass away. Death is something that's going to come to every one of us. Let's do this service to humanity when we pass away. Let us all be vigilant in that. In most of other countries in the world, there is this provision in which you can make this will, but wherever there are instances in which there is this facility, but people are actually, I mean, they don't realize that this is something that they can do. Let us all come together and make this effort that we write down this will and let our parents know, let our siblings know that we would like to donate our organs once we pass away so that they could become beneficial for people who outlive us. Thank you very much. Do reflect on this and see you inshallah next Saturday.